YouTube. I did promise you that I would be back, and I am. I'm going to read chapter 11. I tried to fix some of my box problems, and I thank everybody who's been listening. Alright, I decided to bring this box a little closer. So that's where my phone's not falling out. Alright, it's not super close. Super close isn't good sometimes. I tried to get a new hairstyle today. I don't know, I was trying. I got back here. I decided just to do a braid in front. I don't know, something a little different in my life. But anyway, I put my crocheting needle on my back. It seems to be holding things up better. Alright, now I'm going to start. Alright, chapter 11, and Bill O'Reilly and Martin Dugard killing the mob. It has been 5 years since organized crime was exposed on national television, but instead of being cowed, I think it says cowed, I don't know. I never heard of that term. The mafia has grown even stronger, especially in New York. 3,000 guests packed the ballroom at Times Square Hotel. Among them are the heads of America's 24 major crime families, including the mafia kingpins Vito Genovese, Albert Anastasia, and Sam Guanacia, and Joe Profasi. Frank Costello of the Lucinio family is currently serving an 11-month sentence for tax evasion and obviously cannot attend. Longtime kingpin and Costello ally Joe Adonis is also absent. Now living in Milan, Italy after deportation by the U.S. government. Despite the public awareness brought forth by Kafner hearings 5 years ago, the mob has thrived, as evidenced by this lavish sit-down dinner reception. Gambling and illegal narcotics are the foundation of the increased affluence. And heavens like Las Vegas and Havana allow the mafia to flourish in settings of sympathetic to them. Yet America in 1956 is in transition, and criminals are being forced to change right along with the country. Some historians will later view 56 as the most pivotal year of the decade. The Cold War between United States and Soviet Union has intensified, and the fear of a nuclear doomsday is real. Dwight Eisenhower will soon be reelected through his calm persona and centrist policies are seemingly out of touch with the violent clashes between blacks and whites now ravaging in Deep South. In addition, Congress has passed into law no, into a bill that will construct an interstate highway system, spurring suburban growth and bringing forth new inventions such as the motel and the drive-in movie theater. But the shift in American culture goes beyond race and roads. Elvis Presley released the breakout smash hit Heartbreak Hotel in January, ushering in the rock and roll sound of that now pushes aside crooners like mob favorite Frank Sinatra. The new mania is accepted by a more low key movement known as the Beat Generation, which turns its back on traditional American values to embrace free sexuality and recreational drugs. And while no Mafincio is in the bathroom tonight, would rather dream of donning a beret and playing the bongo and drum in the manner of some beat gatherings. They are more than happy to provide the marijuana and heroin that fuels some beatnik behavior. But on stage here at the Astor, rock and roll has no place. Instead, Anthony Dominic Benito, who performs under the name of Tony Bennett, croons for mingling crowd. At 30, Bennett is a singing sensation, but out of respect for the gathering, he performs tonight. Gratis, another prominent Italian, Eugenio Mario Giovanni Pasi, and sends his best wishes and blessings from Rome. The 80-year-old Pasili is known worldwide as Pope Pius XII. Pontiff's motives for involving himself in a mafia wedding are unclear, but the bride and groom are making plans to stop at the Vatican during their honeymoon to pay their respects. The occasion on the Astor is the wedding of Rosaline Profassi and Salvatore Bill Bonanno, uniting two of New York's most powerful crime families. This is the largest gathering of mafia notables since the Havana Conference. But the mood is celebration, not business. The groom's father, James Bonanno, aka Joe Bonanno's, watches over the proceedings. Proud that he is reunited the mob, if only for one night, he has carefully scrutinized the seating arrangements, making sure that the rivals are on opposite side of the hall from one another, but no matter where they are, all can easily see the 7-foot tall wedding cake. At last they came. Bonanno will later reminisce they were making an effort to be nice. Nice does not last long. This date is May 2nd, 1957. Frank Costello is temporarily out of the jug, as he terms it, having been released from prison on bail before the Keefler hearings. Costello's only conviction has been 34 years earlier for carrying a gun. But this televised performance changed the mobster's life, making him the focus of intense government scrutiny into his business dealings in 1954. He was convicted for evading 28,532 in federal taxes. But this past March, he was temporarily set free on $25,000 bail to await a ruling on whether his actual sentence should be 5 years or time served. In New York City, has long been divided among what is known as the five families, all descended from Sicilian immigrants: Bonanno, Luce, Lucinio, Gambino, and Profassi families are part of the nationwide organized crime consortium known as the Commission. The boss of each family, as well as leaders of Buffalo, New Orleans, and Tampa mobs, and Chicago's outfit, pulled away in settling disagreements. To prevent turf wars, each family's territory in five boroughs in New Jersey is controlled by this collective. Should a leader become unstable and need to be replaced, permission from all other bosses is required. Right now, Frank feels safe. It's true that the deportation of Joe Adonis, as well as 3 years spent in jail, have weakened the mobster's hold on Lucino crime family. Yet Costello is sure that his allies will remain loyal. He is a longtime alliance of Albert Anastasia, who now heads his own crime family after murdering the former Gambino boss, Vincent Magano, in 1951. Even as the Kiefer hearings were still in session, Costello is also close with Tommy Luce of the Bronx and New York mob, a man known for his diplomacy. The three men form a majority within five families. This should keep Costello in power long after his legal woes pass, or so he hopes. Unbeknownst to the Prime Minister of the Underworld, as Costello is nicknamed, Vito Genovese is now quietly attempting to pull Luce over to his side. Frank Costello is enjoying his freedom in New York. He spent several hours on the warm spring at Biltmore Hotel relaxing in a Turkish bath. Then it was on to dinner at the white tablecloth French-Italian restaurant La Agone with his wife Bobby and few friends. But when the party moves to the bar for drinks, Costello excuses himself, takes a cab to his 7-room Manhattan apartment across the street from Central Park. The time is 10:55 p.m. The mobster does not notice a large black Cadillac that follows a taxi, then slows to a stop in front of the landmark, majestic apartment building. Costello greets doorman Norval Keith as he enters the lobby. Suddenly, a thick Italian voice shouts at the mobster, "This is for you, Frank." Costello instinctively turns his head towards the yelling, even as his burly assault fires at a .38 caliber pistol from 15 feet away. The hitman Vinny the Chin Guinea is a former boxer who now works as an enforcer for Vito Genovese. Costello recognizes the 300-pound assassin in the split second before the bullet seizes the right side of his skull. Instantly, blood spurts from the wound. Costello falls hard onto a leather lobby couch. Gigant pushes past the doorman out onto 72nd Street, where the black Cadillac awaits. As the car speeds away, Vinny and Chin is sure he has conducted a successful hit on Frank Costello. But Costello is still alive, and the act of his name being called out before the round left the gun barrel allowed Costello to turn his head just enough to literally dodge the bullet. Through the blood flows from the wound, my boss is merely gazed. He is immediately taken by taxi to Roosevelt Hospital, where doctors confirm the bullet entered near Costello's right ear and trace the curvature of his skull before exiting just above the neck. Increasingly, x-rays show already no damage to his skull. Meanwhile, as the surgeons do their work, New York police conduct a surreptitious search of Frank Costello's belongings. Gross casino wins of 426 and 57 reads one scrap of paper. 60 is 651,284. A subsequent investigation reveals the money to be his to take from the brand new Tropicana Hotel in Las Vegas. This is the first confirmed involvement between New York mob and Vegas casinos. The fluke piece of evidence is enough to have Frank Costello return to prison, but it is the near assassination that changes life. When called upon to name the assassin in court, the boss invokes a code of amare, claiming he doesn't recognize the man who shot him. I don't have an enemy in the world, Costello tells the NYPD. Apparently befuddled as to why anybody would try to kill him, I must have been mistaken for someone else. Yet Frank Costello knows that Vito Genovese will not rest until he takes control of the Senile crime family, which will certainly mean death for Costello. At 76 years old, he is financially comfortable and enjoys the love of a former showgirl to whom he has been married for almost 40 years. So rather than endure the threat of another hit, Costello takes the unpreceded step of retiring from the mafia, and he'll return to prison to complete his sentence, then upon his release live out his days at the Majestic. No longer boss of Luciano crime family, Costello settles into a daily routine of rising up at 9 a.m., walking to Woodworth Astoria for a shave, manicure, and shoe shine, lunch at the Madison Hotel, then evenings entertaining celebrities in Majestic's corner apartment at 18F. Costello's days of working about law enforcement arrest or spies mafia hits are over. He is even on record as seeing a psychiatrist once a week to discuss his feelings. Vito Genovese, who has patiently abided his time since that long ago attempt to take control at the Havana conference, wants nothing to do with his retirement. His only concerns are power and wealth. Vito Genovese has finally won. The Lucchino crime family is no more. The Genovese crime family is born. Albert Anastasia is also expanding his crime family. The mobster, once named Terremoto, the earthquake, has muttered and is no longer the impulsive executor of his younger days. For instance, it was a few years ago that he ordered the murder of Brooklyn resident Arnold Schwarzer or Schuster, a 25-year-old clothing salesman who became a local hero for capturing legendary bank robber White Sutton. But when Shutter went on television to broadcast about the apprehension, Anastasia just happened to be watching, shouting at the TV, "I can't stand squealers." And then he sent his crew to assassinate the amateur detective. Schuster shot once in each eye and twice in the groin as a message to others who might meddle in the crime world. But now Albert is a changed man. Anastasia, the New York Times will note, could not seem pleasant, genial, or generous. It is 10:18 on this chilly Friday morning. The notorious former hitman for murder, Incorporated, wears a brown suit and a gray hat, and he enters the Park Sheraton Hotel here at Manhattan. Anastasia removes his long blue topcoat and takes a seat on Brasso's, the lobby barber shop. The recessed fluorescent lighting accentuates the deep lines in Anastasia's face, brought on by heavy losses at the racetrack. The mobster takes a seat in chair 4 facing the window onto 55th and 7th. His back is to the door. The small shop is busy with 2 other customers already seated, as well as a staff of 5 barbers, a manicurist, a valet, two shoe shine men, and owner Arthur Grasso. Haircut, Anastasia says brusquely to barber Joseph Bashino. Bashino places a sheet on the gangster's neck. Anastasia's chair is reclined, and hot towels are placed over his face to soften his beard for a shave that precedes the barber. Anastasia is now 35. The attempted hit on longtime friend Frank Costello has rattled the burly mobster, fearing he might be next. Anastasia recently increased the number of personal bodyguards from 1 to 3. A 10-foot metal fence now surrounds his new mansion in Fort Lee, New Jersey, and the lawn is patrolled by 2 snarling Doberman pinschers. Anastasia's greatest fear, however, is not his own death, but his hit on his wife and 22-year-old son. In truth, the possibility of such an attack dwindles with every passing day. Anastasia almost went to war with Gino Genovese, but instead the 2 men sat down to dinner with the leaders of 5 families where they traded accusations before making peace. Reluctantly, they renounced going to war with one another. Boss Joseph Bono will recall the rest of us raised our glass in a toast for peace. Albert and Vito kissed each other on the cheek. That peace has allowed Anastasia time to conspire with Meyer, Lansky, and Tampa Ma boss Santo Trafante in hopes of expanding his family's operations into Cuban casinos and drug smuggling. In fact, Anastasia is so confident in the gangland truce that he travels without a bodyguard today. He now relaxes as the towels are removed. The barber spins him around to face the mirror. The time is now 10:30 a.m. as Anastasia reclines with his eyes closed. Suddenly, two men below average height enter the barber shop from the hotel lobby. Both went to wear foras and aviator sunglasses. Scarves cover the lower portion of their faces. Each wears one black glove. Striding quickly to chair 4, the two gunmen poke Barber Joseph Bacino with the barrel of their pistol as a suggestion to get out of the way. Immediately as he flees, they take up positions on either side of Albert and Anastasia. Everyone else in the shop moves quickly for the door. Hearing the commotion, Anastasia sits up quickly and attempts to protect himself, but it's too late. 10 quick shots are fired. The first two are what coroners call defensive wounds, shattering Anastasia's left hand and wrist as he throws up his arm in a failed attempt to protect himself. Moving quickly, Anastasia plunges at the gunman, but in confusion makes the tragic mistake of attacking their images in the mirror. Now facing the wrong direction, he's hit in the hip, the spine, and finally the skull. As the New York Times reports, apparently the bullet at the back of the head ended Anastasia's life completely. That's a lot of bullet holes. Alright. Chapter 11 is getting very interesting. As the crime boss crumbles to the floor, wrapped in white barber towels, and the killers exit onto 55th Street and immediately blend into the sidewalk crowds before entering a waiting car. The pistols are already abandoned, one dropped in a doorway and the other in a trash can. By midnight, New York police will interview 50 eyewitnesses with a list of 10 more to be interrogated. Vito Genovese had the most to gain from Anastasia's slaying, and despite the truce called by 5 families, there was every reason to believe he authorized the hit. Yet to this day, the killers are still unknown. Curiously, Anastasia was a known crime boss, and the very public murder had all the appearances of gangland slaying. But in Washington, J. Edgar Hoover of the FBI still insists that organized crime in America is a myth. That is about to change. Is there any organization such as the Mafia? Bobby Kennedy asked Federal Bureau of Narcotics agent Joseph Amato. Or is that just the name given to the Italian underworld? The date is November 13th, 1957, 2 weeks to the day since Albert Anastasia was gunned down. The weather outside is wet and dreary. As television cameras broadcast proceedings nationwide, Kennedy addresses the witness in caucus room of the old Senate office building in Washington. The 31-year-old Massachusetts native now serves as chief counsel for the committee while the Senate investigates improper activities in labor and management as they relate to organized crime since 1946. Agent Amato has been part of a four-man detail of American FBN agents working out of New York City field office. Their stated purpose is to end mafia narcotics operation. Now with Kennedy as chief counsel, Amato appears before a select Senate hearing investigating the mob, known as McKellen Committee after John Little McLean. The Southern Baptist senator from Arkansas has the panel more often than the nickname of Rackets Committee, sorry. At Kennedy's request, the freshman senator from Massachusetts has acquired a seat. The senator will be his big brother John, a World War II hero and Democrat presidential hopeful. Bobby Kennedy has served as Senate counsel since 1954, taking on his current lead role when the Democrats obtain the Senate majority. Rumors of illicit behavior within America's top labor unions surfaced in 1955, leading President Dwight Eisenhower to request a federal investigation. Senator McLean soon asked that Bobby Kennedy serve as the committee's lead counselor, giving him broad authority to set the agenda and ask and question witnesses. The bold young attorney takes on a new role with typical zeal, knowing very little about the unions or organized crime, but determined to end labor corruption. He even travels to New York as a part of his research, where he accompanies Joseph Amato at the FBN Italian squad as they make drug busts on the nighttime streets. Washington insider Alice Longworth, daughter of Theodore Roosevelt, describes the Ernest Kennedy's moralistic fervor as revolutionary priest. This places Bobby squarely at odds with his father and oldest brother as the Kennedy clan gathers for Christmas in 1956. He eagerly announces his role in the hearings about organized crime, only to encounter one of the most ferocious rows in family history. Sister Jean Kennedy Smith will call the fracas the worst one we ever witnessed. Joseph Kennedy rages at his young son, a danger to family ambition. John F. Kennedy plans to run for president in 1960. Are closely tied with mafia-controlled unions who traditionally vote Democrat. JFK sides with his father, fearing his brother's investigation might turn the Longshore Teamsters against his candidacy. But in the end, Bobby gets his way. John Kennedy reluctantly accepts a spot in the committee to block conservative South Carolinian Strom Thurmond from being part of the high profile panel. In 1956, John F. Kennedy was passed over for vice president spot on the Democrats' party ticket in favor of Senator Kiefer. As Kennedy has been reminded by journalists, Kiefer's national fame derives solely from prosecuting organized crime on national television. Doing the same with those McLean hearings will go a long way towards propelling John Kennedy to the next political level, yet the normal charismatic Massachusetts senator does not seem to care. John Kennedy shows his apathy through poor attendance and a bored demeanor. On those days, he does sit in a committee. Bobby Kennedy is the exact opposite. He relentlessly pursuit of organized crime. He has led him to his very moment. His agent Amato sits before the committee and prepares to answer the simple and dangerous question: is there a mafia? Amato has been a federal agent for 17 years and is well known in the peril associated with the answer he is about to give. Television cameras have been forbidden from showing any part of his image, and he sits with his back to the room to hide his face. This is a big question to answer, Amato replies. But we believe that there does exist today United States a society loosely organized for a specific purpose of smuggling narcotics and committing other crimes in the United States. Bobby Kennedy launches his follow-up question immediately. And that is what you consider the mafia? It has its core in Italy and is nationwide, Amato concludes. In fact, international. By sheer coincidence, the very same moment, Bobby Kennedy is grilling Joseph Amato about the existence of the mob. An international mafia summit is about to begin. 300 miles north of Washington, a tiny upstate New York town of Appalachian, Vino Genovese has called a meeting of North America's top mafia members, with Frank Costello and Albert Anastasia now gone. Genovese considers himself uncontested boss of all bosses. He now called a meeting to make it official. As far as the FBI is concerned, this conference is fiction. If there's no such thing as organized crime, then mobsters could not possibly gather anywhere. But Agent Amato is testifying in Washington. This loosely organized syndicate is very much a reality. Upstate New York, a vast rural area that extends from the lower Hudson Valley to Canada, and it is that Mafioso have traveled from all across America as well as Cuba, Puerto Rico, even Sicily. They gather at 33-acre estate of mobster Joseph Barbara, with its big stone house, guest college, and sprawling lawn. The mafiosi are dressed in fine suits and coats, with the bosses meeting inside the main lodges. Their soldiers gather around the massive barbecue grill. The smell of thick steaks being cooked mingles with the aroma of cigar and cigar smoke. This is a business meeting with all the tension that implies, but it is also a gathering of far flung friends and associates with profane jokes and insider conversations about a world of their own. The neutral site of Chicago was Genevieve's first choice for the meeting. Their violent mob boss Sam Gianse would have been able to host the conference at any number of locations without any fear of poll interference. But Javansi's fellow crime boss, Joe Bonanno, it prefers Barbara's wooded property, thinking it far more inconspicuous out of respect. Gito Genovese bows to Bonanno's wishes. There are many Mafansi in attendance, but there is not enough room in Barbara's house to accommodate them. Reservations have been made for the best rooms at a number of local hotels. Barbara's spacious yard is now a parking lot filled with Cadillacs, Lincoln Continentals, and Lincoln Premiers, favored by mobsters. But even amidst this lavish collection of automobiles, at the Chrysler Crown Imperial limousine that delivered Vito Genovese to the gathering stands out for his opulence. The vicious Genovese holds court as the assembled gangsters calmly discuss gambling, narcotics, prostitution, and the division of Albert Anastasia's empire. A radical new idea is also on the agenda that, oh, and get it in there, of expanding mob operations that already account for more than 7 million in illicit value annually. The plan is to move beyond traditional core mob businesses to the very fabric of American government. This scheme would mimic traditional mafia operations in Sicily by taking control of national unions, interstate trucking, textile industry, Cuba's sugar trade, and the prison system. Unbeknownst to the member mobsters, Sergeant Edgar Dwight Croswell of New York State Police has other plans. Sergeant Croswell is 34, pale, tall, and 30-year veteran of the force. The sort of man so fascinated by his job that he trains his young son to recognize cars by make and model if they ever need to identify a vehicle in court. My hobby is police work, he explains to those wondering about his passion for law enforcement. Croswell's is thin to the point of being gaunt, a chain smoker who favors Salem cigarettes. A stomach ulcer requires that he drink nothing more potent than milk. The detective not only commands the local state troopers barracks at Vestal, 7 miles from Appalachian, but the divorced Croswell also sleeps each night in the Spiriton concrete structure. With no place to call home and nothing else to occupy his time, the lanky trooper makes it his business to know every single criminal happening in his jurisdiction. Thus, Detective Croswell has spent considerable time scrutinizing the individual he believes to be Appalachia's most sinister resident, Joseph Barbara. is a transplant from Pennsylvania who moved to town in 1944, then bought his property at a Canada Dry bottling plant in that order. By all appearances, Barbara is a solid citizen who now controls the local beer and soft drink dealerships. He is an active community leader, philanthropist as well, and his property is actually a compound, a home made of stone, a stable garage, and a barbecue area of the sort of estate man means rightfully enjoy. But to Trooper Croswell, something about Joseph Barbara is not quite right. Croswell has been suspicious for a very long time. The Barbara home has seen dubious comings and going in the past. So it has become common practice for Croswell to keep the estate under surveillance. In fact, he has been keeping tabs on Barbara since the suspected mobster's arrival in Appalachian 13 years ago. Croswell has maintained an informal vigil, learning that Barbara's background includes a significant number of arrests that detectives' interest and leads to surveillance. The Barber family is not oblivious to Croswell's attention. They don't they do not know his name simply by referring to him as the that state trooper. 1 year ago, Croswell's vigilance paid off when the state police arrested underboss Bonanno crime families. He left Barbara's home. Surprisingly, once Carmen Galanti was in custody, the contingent of police from New Jersey arrived in the Appalachian and tried to bribe the troopers in an attempt to arrange Galante's freedom. This unusual and highly illegal abuse of police power led by the indictment of those official officers that also served a lesson to Croswell that the mafia's tentacles are everywhere. More recently, while the local Parkway Hotel investigating. And this picture here is Croswell. He's that detective that's really busy. He really looks like a busy man. Hello, friends. Oh, I guess the only person that was active in my story was the husband. Alright. Alright. Individual pays for his room with a bad check. Sergeant Croswell overheard Joseph Barbara's son making a large number of room reservations. Joseph Barbara okay. Joseph Barbara explained to the clerk that if he required double rooms for upcoming beverage convention, he would not name the individuals who occupy him. Appleton had a population of 1,000, so any of such convention would have a major impact on the town's economy. Out of curiosity, Croswell starts checking around town to see if there have been any other unusual transactions. He asks the local butcher if the Barber family had recently placed any large orders. The answer is yes. Not trusting the quality of the local butcher's fare, Joseph Barber had ordered 220 pounds of steak and veal from Armour and Company to be shipped from Chicago and delivered to his home. The cost comes to $432. Bowing to the mafia's code of generosity, Barber has potentially or pointedly not ordered chicken, which isn't considered to be mainly to the mafia, thus were serving to esteemed guests. In addition, Detective Croswell finds out that Barbara has also been purchasing enormous quantities of sugar, which could indicate the presence of illegal alcohol production on the premises of the Barber compound. Suspecting that the Barber estate has been an organized crime refuge in the past, Sergeant Croswell has every reason to believe that the out-of-town guests might have a similar affliction due to those hotel reservations. Croswell knows the date on which the visitors will be arriving. McFall Road is the only path leading in or out of Barbara's property. On the morning of November 14th, dressed in plain clothes, Trooper Croswell drives his unmarked police car within 50 yards of the compound, uses binoculars to surveil the cars parked on the lawn. The air is cold and smells like rain. Croswell is accompanied by his partner, Trooper Vincent Visico, as well as two agents of Treasury Department, Art Rustin and Ken Brown, work in the alcohol and tobacco tax division, and have agreed to assist this morning's based on remote chance they will be able to enter Joseph Barber's property and catch him in the act of illegal distilling alcohol. Rather than that, there is little Sergeant Croswell can hope to achieve. He cannot enter Barber's property to question the guests. No criminal acts have been committed. So this presence might be construed as bigoted towards Italian Americans. He could concoct a reason to make an arrest, but in reality, unless the individual has outstanding warrants, anyone arrested would be likely would be likely to be set free immediately. For lack of cause, Croswell would then be seen as an overzealous small town policeman, perhaps lose his job. However, the trooper does possess the authority to stop any vehicle once it leaves Barber's property and request those inside to provide identification. A person who fails to show ID or attempts to run can then be arrested. After Sarah, After inspecting the line of Lincolns and Cadillacs, Croswell and other officers began writing down license numbers. There's no sign of danger, but sensing that he might need assistance, Croswell's radios for backup help. 17 officers responded. As lead investigator with state police, Croswell is now a senior officer on the scene. He ordered the installation of roadblocks to prevent departures from the Barbara's home, and also orders a cordon of officers to surround the house in the local woods to stop any escapes on foot. Now all Croswell can do is wait. Soon a local fish vendor drives up the roadblock after making a delivery. Croswell allows Bortello Guzzi to pass, only to see him turn the truck around and head back to Barbara's property. The detective immediately knows what will happen next. Inside the living room of the four main house, the big bosses discuss business. Sam Diacana, Santo Trafficine, Joe Bonanno, Carlo Gambino, and Joe Profassi and Vito Genovese are all engaged. The walls are paneled in wood. The fireplace is 12 feet wide and made of stone. And the windows are covered in thick drapes. A baby grand piano and a china hutch also fill the room. Ironically, given Genevieve's once passionate belief that the value of narcotics trade, the big bosses are currently discussing whether to pardon drug trafficking. New laws mean severe prison sentences for dealers, but despite the enormous drop in mafia's earnings, they should decide to leave the lucrative drug business. Jennifer's is really not interested in that. He is more concerned with being named boss of all bosses. Outside near the barbecue, lower level mafia soldiers talk among themselves. The steaks from Chicago are cooking, the smell filling the air in anticipation of an enormous feast. Once business is concluded, beer on tap is available in the screened-off summer pavilion. One of the attendees, Carmine Lombardi, fears immediate death after a former fixer for Albert Anastasia. Lombardi knows the big bosses are currently discussing his future. A death sentence already has been passed, but he is hoping they will reconsider. Should they not, there is a very good chance Lombardi's steak lunch will be his last. In the kitchen, the main house, Joseph Barbara and her housekeeper sit at a large round breakfast table. Miss Barbara has a view out the window towards McFall Road, where she sees a familiar face just beyond the parked Cadillacs. Is that the state trooper? She says to Marguerite Russell. Suddenly comes the sounds of shouting. State police! Fishmonger Bartolo Guccia warns the mobsters in an Italian thick accent. They're stopping everyone. The stakes are left to burn. The gangsters run. Sergeant Croswell can't believe it. Italian men in thick coats and hats swarm in the parking lot, walking at a very fast pace, unaware that law enforcement has no evidence against them and cannot enter the property. The mobsters are panicking despite criminal past they have taught them to show nonchalant when encountering law enforcement. The assembled gangsters buckle. The fear of years in prison overcomes reason. Some flee to their cars, others trudge into the thick woods, like vermin scudding out of burning woodwork, writes New York Daily News. The underworld chiefs headed for open air. After Chicago mobster Sam Gusinia remains in the main house, believing that the place will enter the estate. But soon he grows weary of the uncertainty and darts into the forest, becoming one of the few escapees. I had to run like a fucking rabbit through the goddamn woods, he would later complain. This place was full of briars. I tore up a $1,200 suit, and some barbed wire ruined my pair of shoes. On the road, the first vehicle carrying a mobster approaches the barrier manned by Sergeant Croswell. He waves it through. This is an international act. Croswell hopes that this display of nonchalance will encourage other drivers to approach him. A few moments later, Croswell is rewarded with a line of cars approach his position. Quickly, he orders the Chrysler Imperial containing Vito Genovese to halt. 5 men are parked inside the car. You've been at Mr. Barbara's, the detective asks. He is very sick, the poor man, says Genevieve, sitting up front on the passenger side. We came to wish him a speedy recovery, but I didn't need to answer that question, do I? Croswell reports IDs and waves Imperial through. More troopers await further down the highway, prepared to stop and detain the car's inhabitants. No arrests are made, but state police have the legal authority to hold suspects without filing charges. New York mandates that this period of time not exceed 12 hours. With all avenues of exit sealed and detainments are swift and numerous, 60 suspected mafioso are placed in custody, including leaders of New York families Vito Gioverse, Joe Profasi, Joe Facio Obacano, and Carlo Gabino. Tampa mobster Santo Trafanti is named as NAB. Each is taken into Vestal Barracks substation, where they are ordered to take off their shoes and sit on the floor with their hands on their heads for processing, while guarded by state troopers with their gold watches, diamond pinky rings, and expensive suits. These men look drastically out of place in the dusty barracks. Coming to an end soon. Croswell has instructed the state troopers to make effort to coerce the mobsters into doing something wrong so they can be held in jail longer. But Mafaso knows better than to react. We gave them a tough time at the station house, Croswell will admit, but we couldn't even make them commit to disorderly conduct. Each mobster's belongings are searched, but no guns or drugs are found. Sergeant Croswell reaches to beat the 12-hour deadline for setting the men free, but will also take time personally to interrogate each man. Where were you doing at Barbara's? He asked time and time again. Most responded in similar fashion, sitting as they were concerned about Joseph Barbara's health and had come to wish him well. In fact, back at the state, stress has gotten better of Joseph Barber, and he has suffered a second non-fatal heart attack. He will be dead in just 2 years after having lost his house and a business due to infamy created by Trooper Croswell's aggressive policing on this November day. As Croswell concludes his questioning just before the 12-hour deadline expires, he tallies his findings. These men are definitely career criminals. Only 9 detained gangsters have no criminal record between the orders. Croswell counts 275 prior arrests and 100 convictions. Their average age is 23. Half of them were born in Sicily or southern Italy. The most astonishing new evidence of the breadth of the criminal operations has been suspected that New York, Chicago, and Miami are mob hotbeds, but the detangled delegates also hail from places like Texas, Colorado, Kansas, and Alabama. They are heresy to the eastern seaboard criminal world. Croswell tells reports whose first interview trooper by phone crosses then floods the Appalachian to cover the incendiary story in Washington. J. Edgar Hoover rises on the morning of November 15th, prepared for the calm of his ritual, poached eggs on toast while reading the morning paper. Just 1 month ago, Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first satellite in history. The Russians now have complete control of space, a fact that terrifies the American public. Hoover's anti-communist campaigns are the most concentrated than ever. But all the changes as Hoover opens the morning New York Times. 65 hoodlums seized in a raid and ran out of upstate New York Village. The front page headline infuriates the FBI director. For the past 2 months, he has very publicly stated that communism is America's biggest threat and that there is no such entity as the mafia. But the abolition makes Hoover look like a fool. For a quarter century, the director has publicized himself as America's top lawman, his finger on the pulse of all criminal activity, but now he well knows his credibility is shattered. The director can barely contain his rage as he speaks with Clyde Tolson about the situation during their drive to work. In the end, it is decided that Hoover must cling to a story the mafia still does not exist. Agents will be instructed to refer to Appalachian as the so-called mafia meeting. Speaking through bureau mouthpiece Louis B. Nicholas, Hoover continues to express strong doubts about the mafia's existence. Nicholas, the FBI's third command behind Hoover and Tolson, defines the mob in Hoover's abstract terms. The boys in these parts of the United States just drift together for a number of reasons, all pretty clear when you think things over. It's like a bunch of Dutchmen getting together while hoisting their glass, exclaiming, together we are sticking." Incredibly, some members of the media still buy Hoover's version of events. No mafia at Barbara's. That begins the headline of Binghamton, New York Press, a city next to Appalachian. The state concludes none of the U.S., says the FBI. And it says, alerted to the news about Appalachian, Bobby Kennedy storms out of his office and drives 10 blocks to the Department of Justice. He takes up the elevator to J. Edgar Hoover Kennedy request files and each of the arrested mobsters. Out of the 60 men arrested, America's top law enforcement agency possesses almost no detailed information about them. What files the FBI does have are mostly newspaper clippings instead of intelligence gathered by field agents. A stunned Kennedy leaves Hoover and crosses the street to the Treasury Building, where he turns to the Federal Bureau of Narcotics for information. Unlike his arch-rival Hoover, FBN Director Anschler has plenty of documentation on the mob and is happy to share. The FBI did not know anything, Bobby will later remember, about these people who were major gang members in the United States. As for FND, they had something on everyone. Kennedy will know. On November 27, 13 days after Appalachian confrontation, an embarrassed J. Edgar Hoover is finally forced to admit the existence of organized crime. He insists the top hoodlum program as a modern version of Public Enemy Number 1 and requires agents in the field nationwide to draw up a list of 10 most notorious criminals in their cities. The words mafia and abolition are never referred. Yet, thanks to alert investigation of Sergeant Edgar Croswell, America's top fighting official, finally acknowledging the mafia. But as Hoover well known, Bobby Kennedy is way ahead of them. And Kennedy plans to bring down organized crime all by himself. On December 22nd, 1957, Bobby Kennedy meets behind closed doors with the 32 investigators working for Senator McLean hearings. He declares his intent to subpoena each arrested gangster from the Appalachian Summit, ordered them to appear before anti-racketeering subcommittee. Kennedy is sincere in his determination to expose the major crime families, yet he's equally passionate about his own bloodline. Both elements are slowly emerging into America's consciousness. 3 weeks ago, his brother, Senator John F. Kennedy, was featured in Time magazine as the Democrat whiz of 1957. The JFK has size on White House, and Bobby Kennedy knows the abolition means more viewers of the Senate's televised mafia investigation, allowing his brother to raise his public profile even higher. That is, if Senator Kennedy actually shows up at the hearings. In many ways, JFK looks down at his younger brother, Bobby, seeing him as a relentless nuisance instead of a resource. The younger Kennedy is determined to change his brother's perception, but even more than hoping to get his brother elected president of the United States, Bobby Kennedy is eager to please his father, Joe. The Kennedy patriarch is sparing his love for his sons, and as a result, John, Bobby, and little brother Teddy will go to great lengths to make her proud. Bobby knows that Joseph Kennedy is still willing to do whatever it takes to see his son elected as the nation's highest office, including pay $75,000 in advertising to get JFK featured in Time magazine. I just bought a horse for 75,000. The patriarch tells the Archbishop of New York Cardinal Francis Spellman over lunch at the priest Madison Avenue residence. Add another 75,000. I put Jack on the cover of Time. Thus begins the symbolic intertwining of the Kennedy family, J. Edgar Hoover, and the mafia and the press. And in typical gangland style, theirs is a relationship that can only end in mayhem. And we are done with chapter 11. So I'm going to take a break, get something to drink and stuff. And then a little bit later, I'm going to start chapter 12. And I want to thank everyone who listened to me because I like to keep busy, and I hope you enjoy this book. If you have any suggestions, I wanted to read. Let me get this out real quick. I was thinking about something that was less political for the next one, because I'm halfway done with this. And this one is Taming the Wind. Tracy Patterson. And I think it looks like a cowboy love story. So, I don't know if anybody would be interested in listening to a cowboy love story. I actually find them very interesting. I think the cowboys from the South are very romantic. So, when I'm not on, which I don't know how many people I had to listen to this, but leave a suggestion if you want to hear a romance or what, and I can read that too. Thank you for listening, and probably in a little bit I'm going to read another chapter. And I want everyone to have a good day if you got to get to work or get your kids or whatever you have to do for the day. And thank you for listening to my channel.